I retired at 29 years old.
Yeah, I didn't know you were a dancer. That's very interesting.
And I was like, oh, I've always wanted to do that.
I don't actually really know what I'm doing.
Big mistake.
Well, hey, this is life.
Life is a journey, and the journey is everything.
Hey, and welcome back to another episode of Real Stories. I'm your host, Jordan Silvester. Today we've got Justin Teeuwen with us, owner of Meta Excellence, co-founder, sorry.
Yes.
How's it going, Justin?
Amazing. Another great day.
Another great day. So, as usual, let's kick it off with your story. What's the story of Justin?
Amazing. So broad, it could go anywhere. I'll start with where I began. I was born in Chatham.
Okay.
And it's an interesting, funny little story. The day I was born, in the newspaper, in the Chatham Daily News, I think it was the Chatham Daily News, it said, Justin is here. In all big letters. And Justin was not referring to me. It was apparently the name of some computer at the time.
Oh.
Not that was foreshadow. That's just the way I came about. So I was born in Chatham, Ontario, and was raised there. I have 6 siblings, 4 brothers, 2 sisters. Wow. And my parents, my mom and my dad was born and raised, well, not born and raised in Chatham. He was born in Holland, moved to Chatham when he was 4.
Okay.
And my mom, she was born in Italy, moved to Toronto, and then eventually made her way to Chatham. And eventually I came about.
Gotcha.
So I spent most of my early years in Chatham, which is not an exciting or dynamic place. Sorry for those who love Chatham, Ontario. But, for me, it was not exciting nor dynamic. But it was, quiet. I feel like I had a little blend between like country life and city life. Where I was born in Chatham and raised was right on the edge of town. So I could look out my backyard and I could see farm fields. I could see, a little bit further down the way was where St. Clair College was located. And then, I had the city in there as well.
Right. And
so, my early years were spent with a lot of curious questions. I loved school. I loved learning.
Okay.
What some of my earliest memories are my joy of learning. And that is foreshadow of what was to come. Eventually, I made my way out to university. And this is a bit of a funny story, and we can circle back to it later, but I ended up applying to 10 different university programs. So I really could have ended up in a lot of different places.
Right.
But I ended up choosing Windsor.
Ah.
And as a result of choosing Windsor, when I came here, I felt like I was a small fish again. Every time I moved stages in my life, I felt like I finally got comfortable, and then it was time to change.
Okay.
And so when I came to Windsor, I had a blast. I absolutely loved my life in Windsor, because it's that time in life where, I was 18 and I started to just redefine who I was very intentionally. And I feel like that process for me really began around 16, but then got amplified when I moved out on my own. Right. When Windsor became home was at the end of my first year of university. So I finished a whole year of university, and then I thought I was going to go back home. I even set up my old job. And then I got a job in Windsor doing research for the summer. Ah. And so I remember it was a couple weeks into that summer where I said, I'm going home. And I realized I was referring to my Windsor home, not my Chatham home. Ah. And so that's when Windsor shifted. So that was 22 years ago.
Right.
And so I've now spent more than half of my life in Windsor. And so Windsor's home too. And I always describe it as like, I've tried leaving Windsor multiple times, where I even got to the point, I write about this in my first book that I wrote. It's about time. And when I was I had a third of my belongings in my car, and I was ready to move into Toronto and set up a place there. And then it's kind of like The Godfather. I describe it as like, just as I was out, something pulled me back to Windsor. Something just kept pulling me back. And so I've really enjoyed a wonderful life of opportunity in Windsor, covering a wide array of things. Everything from what I studied in university was physics. I then pursued a career in dance for a period of time. That's not something everyone knows about me, but it's something that I'm passionate about. I come from a family of dancers. Actually, all my siblings dance. Oh. We all went to the same studio. My one sister runs her own dance studio out of Chatham. She just celebrated 25 years.
Wow.
25. I got to teach there for about 5 or so of those years. And then after my, dance and physics era, I found that I needed to refocus myself. And I came to this crossroads. So I retired at 29 years old. 29 years old. I was a teacher working in a private school. And I realized that while I enjoyed the work, I really wanted to give back and help people achieve their dreams. This is a theme that's kind of pervaded my whole life story. When I was 19 years old, I went to a workshop in my fraternity, Sigma Chi, and I went to this workshop in Utah, out in the mountains there, and it completely changed my life. Because up until 19, I was going to live the standard, get a house, get a partner, picket fence, car, and then be happy. What I realized was I could do anything I wanted to do with my life. So then the question became, what did I want to do? So from 19 to 29, I spent that whole decade trying to figure out what that was. And in the end, at 19 years old, I felt really passionate. Once I knew that there was all this opportunity, I got into the motivational literature, the self-help literature, read all kinds of books, and I realized I wanted to do that. So when I retired, I bought a house, rented out all the rooms, and just built my first version of my business, what I'm doing right now. In that space, it lacked a lot of direction. I struggled with knowing what to do with my day. I didn't have anyone telling me what to do with my day, where to focus my business. I didn't have any mentors or anything like that. I wrote my first book at that time. That's when It's About Time was written. And so that took quite a bit of that year, but I spent it quite aimless. And then I realized I need mentors. So I secured a couple of mentors, one in my fraternity and one was a professor I knew from university. And those two combined helped define the next decade, where I went back to university. I did my Bachelor of Education. I did a doctorate in education, focusing on cognition and learning. And I also got really involved in my fraternity again in my early 30s, where I was responsible for Windsor as well as 5 other chapters in Michigan. Wow. So I felt like I was like a dad to like over 200 young men as I was overwatching this era and this area. And what I found fascinating in that time was having mentors who gave me so much direction again. It really helped me steer where I was going to go. And so I involved myself deeply in education because ultimately I wanted to know how to help people, how to teach someone how to fish rather than fish for them.
Right.
And so when I finished the doctorate, I said, it's time. I need to get back to reinvigorating that business I'd started at 29. And so I relaunched it, and that's where Meta Excellence came from as a brand and as an identity. Yep. But it was informed by all those experiences from 29 till that point.
Right.
I remember this advice my friend said when I wrote my book, and I gave it to him. He's like, "Yeah, it's okay."
It's okay.
As a friend would tell you. Right?
Yeah.
He's like, "Yeah, it was okay." And I said, "What's missing?" He said, "There's nothing original in here. You're just telling what other people said is wisdom." And I said, so what wisdom do I have? I spent the next 5-6 years wondering what that was. And that's when I discovered metacognition, emotion, wellness, character, all those things that I now talk about and do. I discovered that through that process of looking, well, what is going to be my contribution? What am I curious about?
Right.
What do I want to push the envelope and research on? Okay. And so that's a brief summary of me, from birth till now.
Birth till now. No, that awesome. Thank you, Justin. So again, I didn't know you were a dancer. That's a very interesting adventure, and that your family is in dance. That's a cool thing. So now everyone's probably wondering, so what type of dance is it? Like,
Sure.
My brain's just picturing all kinds of fun.
What are you picturing?
Oh, it's not ballet. It's more the I can't even. My daughter does it, but it's like to the newer music. It's just your natural
like hip hop
movement dance more than straight up ballet. But
so it was straight up ballet. Actually.
There you go.
I was a ballet and tap were my two specializations growing up.
Okay.
So Florence Abel was my dance teacher. She's phenomenal. There are so many people from Chatham who can hail their dance roots to Florence. She was an amazing technician and very passionate about teaching dance. She taught myself and all my siblings. There are even these 2 dance videos we have of us dancing. One where I'm, I think, 7.
Okay.
And then we did it again when I was more like 20. Okay. 21. And so it was a lot of, I'll be honest, I didn't want to dance when I was really little. I was worried about the stigma.
Of course.
Right? I remember having the pink ballet slippers and worrying about how people would tease me and these kinds of things. So I actually kept it secret for a super long time.
Right.
But I got inspired when I was 16. I saw somebody perform from the studio, and she was just really into it. And I was like, wow, I want to dance like that. And so that shifted my mentality on it. And I became a lot more serious about my dance learning. Because
Well,
at that point, it was just once a week.
Yeah. Well, then you said you taught it for 5 years as well. So
I eventually
you
got to that stage.
Serious enough that you actually decided you'd even teach it at one point. So
exactly.
That's a cool thing. And again, from as we're chatting through your life, it sounds like that's kind of the undergird is you're trying to teach everyone kind of through your life, through your experiences.
Yeah.
It's an interesting statement though you meant about the book was when he said to you, yeah, it's the same information that others have said, but your opinion on it, or at least your version. So when he said that to you, what was your original, like, what did you feel? Like, what was that like?
Well, I'd spent 10 years researching what I researched for the book. And then I spent off and on 12, 13 weeks to write the book.
Yeah.
And so a part of me was immediately like, oh, but what about all this that, I put this together. But I actually loved that he told me that because it inspired me to look at what was next.
Awesome.
It was some of the most meaningful feedback that I received about the book because it helped me produce everything I'm producing now. Now I'm almost exclusively producing original content, building off of the greats of others, but looking at what's new, what is going to be that next step. And this sort of lies to the theme of how I look at my life, which is I like to pay it forward.
Right.
Whether that's through researching or teaching or inspiring others, I like to pay forward the gifts that I've received. I wasn't just doing ballet and tap. When I got older, I also got into many other forms.
Okay.
Eventually, I remember, and this is a pretty interesting pivot point. I was 23, I think.
Okay.
And I was sitting around with some physics friends at the university. And there was one who was a break dancer and acrobat.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I've always wanted to do that.
Right.
I've always wanted to do that, but I'm too old to do that. I said at 23. And he's like, nah, you're not too old. I'm like, no. He's like, no, man, like you should go see my gymnastics coach. I'm like, who's your coach? So Timmery Rideout, who still coaches at WinStars Gymnastics in the city.
Okay.
I went to go see her. And I said, hey, I'm worried about getting hurt. I'm in my 20s. I'm not sure, but I've always wanted to learn how to do this. And she's like, you're not too old. And I said, oh. She's like, yeah, like professional Olympic gymnasts can be in their 30s. And I said, wow, you mean I still have time to not only learn this, but I could, if I wanted, reach mastery? And she was like, yeah. So I decided to start doing the things that I'd had inhibitions about myself. That was just one of them that was more obvious. But I remember when I was learning how to do a back handspring, where you set up and then you go. And I tried to muscle my way through it.
Okay.
And I flopped, just totally belly flopped on the mat. And I remember I was completely unable to do it. And I also couldn't visualize it. I couldn't even see the steps in my mind. I knew all the mechanics. I had all the physicality there, but I couldn't visualize it up here. And when I went, I physically would hit this barrier that didn't exist because mentally I couldn't see it. So gymnastics became this new deep love for me. I love ballet. I continued studying with Janice Brode here in the city. And when I studied gymnastics, I learned deeply how your mind is so tied to what you can do with your body and all those ways. And so I took other lessons. I took lessons from the dance bar. I learned hip hop. I learned break dance. I pretty much, if there's a form of dance, I've tried it, learned it. I did Ukrainian for a couple of years. And, I got to my peak. At my peak of pursuing my career, I was auditioning for cruise ships. And I eventually auditioned for So You Think You Can Dance Canada. And there is a blooper reel that you can find me on. I made it to the blooper reel. And it's a funny story, this audition. So I go in, and this is in Toronto. Yep. And the first time I went, I was not in the first lineup. I was a little deeper in. Big mistake. Watching 100 people way better than you go before you is really unnerving. Yes. It was really unnerving for me. So I continued training, went back the next year and said, I'm going to be first in line. So I get there and I'm like fourth in line. So fine. So I get there and I'm auditioning and I'm doing my thing. And the first round, it's improv. Most dancers struggle in improvisation. Not me. That's actually my wheelhouse. I love improvisation. You throw tunes on, I can just go. Especially if I don't think anyone's looking. I can just do it. And so I was, dancing my heart out, and I got the crowd going, got them excited, a crowd of dancers. And so I felt that was that's kind of my jam. I just felt good. Then there was a second round of improv, and I nailed that too. Did really, really great. Then they're like, great, you did wonderful. You're going to the next round. Okay, what is it? You got to have something choreographed. I hadn't choreographed anything. And so I quickly tried to choreograph something the night before and then showed up the next day in the audition, trying to give it everything I could. I forgot all my choreography. I froze. I did every move I swear I didn't even think I would ever do, especially on film.
Wow.
And so had I just improvised my way through that, put on one of my favorite tunes and just jammed, I probably would have been able to continue on.
Going.
Because I remember what one of the people who made it to the top 100 had said. He said, "What was that?" Right after I performed it. He's like, "What was that?" Because there was such a stark difference between one and the next.
Right.
I'd gotten in my own head. I'd gotten in my own way and didn't allow my natural like focus to emerge through. And so that's what I'd shared with him. I'd let it get in my head and was trying to be perfect instead of just focusing on the journey and focusing on the process that I was in that moment. Not to say I would have made it or wouldn't have as a result of that shift, but I learned so much from that audition.
Yeah,
that I carry through all the way to today.
Yeah, when you think about the stage, right?
Yeah.
Again, there's so many stages in life, and dancing is definitely one of the major stages.
Yeah.
And so again, as you're putting yourself out there, like you said, it was interesting. You were better at doing it when you knew everyone was watching, but you had no expectation on yourself.
Yes.
And as soon as you added expectation to yourself, that's where you ran into the problem. It sounds like that was the issue with the back handspring too, right? You were trying to...
Could be. Like, I hadn't thought of it that way.
Well, again, it's your mind saying, okay, well, I understand the mechanics of it, but as soon as I try to implement it, there's an error that my brain can't get past.
It was this deep fear. And I remember showing up to gymnastics class for 3 months. 3 months, I kept going and I kept stopping. And I kept going. And if she put her hand on my back, I could do it. But as soon as her hand was away, couldn't do it. But I just kept showing up and just kept showing up. And eventually I nailed it because I wanted to be able to do these for these auditions. I wanted to be able to pull these tricks out. And that's when I realized, the importance of passion, the importance of grit, of continuing to show up. Yep. And I also realized the importance of your mind. The moment I could visualize it, within a day of me being able to visualize it, I was able to do it. And so I saw that mind-body connection.
Well, because you had the full capacity of skill to do it. You just, again, couldn't visualize. So again, as I'm listening to your stories and as you chat through it, it's a reappearing theme based on the way your mind operates. If it sees the outcome, it can produce the outcome. When it gets stuck, even if it knows the outcome but can't see you doing it, you can't visualize that actual outworking. You seem to get stuck, which is interesting. So when you're going back to, with that information, is there any place in your mind, like you said, I never thought about that spot. When you were saying the other story, my brain went to that and went, interesting, because in my own life, right, where have I been stuck? Where are the places where I struggle? Mine tends to be more in defiance. So I tend to be more, or I'll try to do something just out of sheer stupidity. Okay. Like dare me to, and let's see what happens.
Sure.
But that's when I'm, again, operating much more on a quick response to my physical attribute, not trying to do something perfectly. I'm just trying to do whatever it is I've agreed to do. Yeah. And I managed to usually pull some things off that I didn't even know I could do. Yeah. But the moment I slow down and I study something or try to learn something and think it through and then try to attempt it, that's where I run into the problem.
When I try to be perfect, I always mess up.
Right.
And it's because you get over obsessed with trying to hit that. You're so over focused on trying to deal with the little nuances, you forget the overall process. Right. What makes me excellent when I'm improvising is when I'm not focusing on the overall sequence. I'm literally thinking about the next 4 counts, the next 8 counts. And then once that's done, I don't even think about what I just did. I just go to the next 4 counts and the next 8 counts. Okay. And so when I look at the successes I've had in my life, it's very much like that improvised dance where I'm just focused and present in the moment. And when I'm in that flow state, that's a lot of what flow state talks about, is being in the moment. Right. And you are able to access those higher performing aspects of yourself. And a lot of that is allowing yourself to be free to do that, to be free to make a mistake and just roll with it. Like, improvise into the next thing. That's done. Go to the next thing. And that's where I see where I get stuck, is when I get hung up on trying to be more than what I need to be. Like even this podcast right now is a good example of it. It's live. It's like an improvised dance. If I overthink what I'm trying to say, it's going to flub out. Yep. But if we just have a conversation, have a dance, run a workshop, whatever it is you do, if you just focus in on the moment and what are the demands of that moment, that's enough.
Yeah. Again, when I do things, my nature is I just do them. Somebody's like, how? I'm like, I don't actually really know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I have an idea. Like, it's not, I want to be clear. It's not that I just randomly pick up something and do it randomly. I do think through, and then I just try to do it the way they think best. But one of the things you said earlier was you brought mentors in around you. You brought advisors. Mm-hmm. One of the things as I'm aging is I tend to seek out counsel now more than just attempting my own brain's idea. Yeah. So like somebody else probably has tried something or at least has some other level of knowledge around the thing I'm thinking about. Yeah. And so again, 29-year-old you went, oh, I need this. What was 19-year-old you thinking? Would you have had the same perspective at 19 or 16, you know, when you're talking about the early years? What drove you to realize, you know what, I'm going to go do this thing? I recognize, and was it maturity or was it an experience that taught you that?
So it's an interesting question. It kind of went in a couple directions, but I'm gonna start with a couple interesting milestone moments. I was not, now on reflection, especially having been an educator, I was not a typical teenager.
Okay.
At 13, I had decided I was inspired by the life of Gandhi. I was inspired by my brother who had taken it on. So I created my own diet at 13. And I went into the encyclopedia because that's where you found information in those days. Google wasn't yet really a big thing.
Yep.
And so I went into the encyclopedia and read up all the nutritional requirements. So in this case, the encyclopedia was my mentor. The encyclopedia was my guide. Okay. I looked for an instruction manual on what are the nutrients that the body needs. And then I built out a nutritional meal plan for myself. Oh. And when I think back on that, I'm like, I was really passionate and interested to be doing that for fun. That was for me. I just did that. At 14, the government of Ontario had announced that they were getting rid of grade 13.
Okay.
I was the last group to qualify for that.
Yep.
I didn't want to graduate with a highly competitive double-year cohort. So at 14 years old, I decided that I was going to graduate a year early.
Right.
I went to the guidebook on what courses do you need to take.
Yep.
And then I looked at what universities required of you, and I built out my own learning plan from 14 to 18. I built out all the courses, decided I was going to take a course in summer so that I could have a double spare in my grade 12 year, graduated in grade 12, where you still had to take 5 Englishes, 5 maths. Like I actually had if I had to do that in the grade below me, I would have had fewer courses.
Right.
But I figured out a way to do this. And I remember going to my guidance counselor at 14 years old and said, hey, I worked out this learning plan. I just want to make sure that I haven't missed anything, that I'm going to be able, that this is going to set me up for my future.
To get ahead.
And I remember my guidance counselor being like, yeah, it does look great. And I also think as a teacher now, looking back on that, wow, like who does that?
Right.
Right. But that was the kind of person that I was. Wow. I was always looking for who's done this before. How did they do it? What information do I need to build that out? Wow. At 19 years old, I had stumbled upon Sigma Chi, where I had fraternity brothers to be as mentors and alumni, but I also was involved in student government. I got involved in the UWSA, the University of Windsor Student Alliance, and so I had mentors in there as well, people a couple of years older than me.
Yep.
And so from 18, 19 years old on, I pretty consistently had mentors.
That's awesome.
And it's only when I got to that period in my life where I didn't have any that I was like, oh, this is why I'm off course. I don't have anyone guiding me.
Gotcha.
Right now, you know, which on reflection, as I think about myself right now, I don't think I have any specific mentors. I do have coaches. I do have counselors. I do have professional support that I seek and get help with. But I realize that that's probably because where I'm at is a bit trailblazing.
Right.
Like what I'm doing doesn't have a lot of mentors who are similar. You know, the coaches that I find have built similar businesses and this kind of thing.
Right.
But in every area of my life, I love having an expert who can guide me, you know, who can be that person to check your blind spots and point out where you're off course.
So as a young person, you actually had a lot of planning. So interesting. So you planned out your diets, you planned out your schooling, you got done, you got to the University of Windsor, you found, and as you kept going along, there was always people until you were 29. And that's actually where it wasn't that you went to go find mentors. You realized all of a sudden you didn't have any. And you're like, oh, this is what's been helping me in my life. And you went back to the source and were able to look for that again. That's really cool. It's an interesting perspective because, again, I personally was much more wanderous.
Well, that was how I started my first business. It was very wanderous. Okay. I just said, I'm quitting my job. I've got a house, I'm renting out the rooms. I got my cost of living down really, really considerably. I think I was living on $500 a month at that point.
Wow.
So I had total freedom of time. It's what I really want. I'm like, I can do whatever I want. And the problem is without any direction on that, it became just chaos most of the time.
Gotcha.
And so where I'm at now, and I really credit my doctorate journey to where I developed the independence to be able to build my own, is you don't get through grad school a thesis. You really don't get through it without a lot of self-perseverance and self-persistence. You have a mentor, you have guides, but you still got to just show up and put in the work. And no one's telling you to do that. So on top of working, I was, studying school. And so I learned how to set my own schedule. I never worry about whether I'm going to work enough. I know that I'm going to schedule enough time in my day. Now I find am I going to play enough? Am I going to make time for music? Am I going to make time for art? Am I going to make time for dance? These things that throughout my childhood and my early adult years brought me really great joy. And I've realized only in the last couple of weeks, they weren't only what brought me joy, they were necessary to my life. As much as you're just like, well, I can do that later. It's like, actually, that sustains me in a whole other way. When I was working by physics by day and then dancing by night, something happened where the dancing was helping me do physics.
Right.
And the physics was helping me in my dance. And so I ended up with this cross-lateral Renaissance form of thinking where I have both an artistic and a scientific mind because I spent time cultivating both of those.
Right.
But it wasn't until years of doing them both that they started to blend into each other.
Where you saw the synergy between the two. It's interesting as you were talking there. It's, again, when I look at my own life, there was a time where I went back to work full time, like working my rear off with no fun, no nothing. I took golf off. Like I just said, no, I'm not golfing. I need to work. Grindstone.
Yeah.
Issue. As soon as I did that, it worked for a week before my energy levels just plummeted.
Of course.
Because, again, one of the things I've learned when I'm at my healthiest, which is when I'm doing something enjoyable, I'll say the selfish thing for me is the thing that benefits my wife, my kids, my family, and my business partners the most. Because when I'm good, I'm better for everyone else. But when I'm trying really hard in my pursuit of something, now I'm not saying there aren't times and seasons where you do need to buckle down and grind a little more. But when I did it out of, it felt like preservation, and in the end, it was almost death, killing yourself.
Yeah. And
so as you were talking there, it's the synergy. It's like, as human beings, we need the capacity for both things. We need to be able to understand that work and a work ethic is very important, being that, but it's also important that you have good relationships, that you have people, you have enjoyment, you're able to, because I think we're relational creatures.
Yeah.
And when we're enjoying each other's company, just having a conversation.
Right.
It's amazing how you just get to know each other, you get to enjoy each other. And we don't always agree on everything. That's one of the fun parts. One of the fun parts for me, it's not about arguing, it's about understanding. I think, when you say all the studying and all the things you do, it's very curious to me. I'm like, wow, that's a lot of education. And see, I love to learn.
Yeah.
But I don't like education. It's funny.
You mean
as that
formal
formal education, because I find so often formal education tends to miss the importance of the relational portion of the businesses. It's very academic. It's like, I get that's the academic side. What does it look like to actually do the job? Right?
Yeah. It becomes, some would describe sterile.
Yeah.
You're existing in this space that feels devoid of direct meaning. And what's interesting is that actually was my area of research. I was curious about how do I make things practical? And so I remember when I was an early teacher, students would say to me, why do you learn math? Now, I love math.
Yep.
I'm guilty of playing with math. And I remember I have a couple friends, we do science fiction together, both reading and writing, and it's a huge passion of mine. I'm actually working on a science fiction world building. I've been doing it for like 15 years. And we were sitting and discussing, calculus and a bunch of other things over breakfast at a restaurant. Mm-hmm. And this woman sitting next to us was like, what course are you guys studying for? And we're like, oh, this isn't a course. We're just doing it for fun. And she's like, I've never seen people do math for fun. So for me, it was very natural that math was a fun activity. But I will tell you, everything you learn from, say, kindergarten to second year university is not really playing with math. It's just learning foundational skills and how the systems we know work.
Right.
You start playing when you go beyond that level, when you go deeper, and you start actually seeing how to build systems and what makes those systems work and where do the rules of math come from that keep it so nice and contained in the way that it does. And that can become really exciting. But did you hear how far down the road it is before you get to play?
Yep.
Right? I remember my sensei telling me about this. I studied martial arts for a brief period of time. I really love it, actually, the whole process of studying, martial art in particular, even though I haven't studied it for a while. You have to pick what you're going to focus on.
Yep.
And so I remember he said the word for black belt is shodan.
Shodan.
And it means student.
Ah.
And what a pivot, because we tend to think of people who have their black belts as being experts.
Right.
When it actually means I'm now a student. And multiple degrees of black belts come from giving back to the form, teaching, advancing the research side of it, much like we see academics.
Wow.
So when I did my doctorate, and I remember on the day of my defense, I was not nervous or worried about my defense. It was one of the first times I was being evaluated, and I was like, I'm happy with what I'm producing here, what I've produced. I know that I'm the expert in what I'm doing, and I felt just at peace with it. And I also realized that having a doctorate didn't make me any more special than anyone else. It meant that I now can say I know how to learn.
Right.
I know how to be a student in this very specific area. I know how to learn, study something different and new that no one's done before. And that confidence, the confidence to know that I'm the first to discover this, but I know that this is something that's discovered.
Right.
That takes a long time.
Yeah.
My wish for education is that feeling would be encapsulated the whole time.
Gotcha.
Where from kindergarten all the way up, we tend to suppress that out. Sir Ken Robinson talks a lot about the industrialization of education and how we're put into these rows and columns and sorted by manufacturing date. He has these great, you can look it up on YouTube and it's, but I really resonated. I actually had the pleasure even of meeting him one time. He was just as fabulous in person as he is in his persona. But I really take to that model of how do we build the curiosity and excitement?
Right.
Because for me, I was curious, like I said, from 6 years old.
Yeah.
I was curious before then. I remember picking up books and wanting to learn to read. And that curiosity has never stopped, but it does for a lot of people. As a teacher, I saw as curiosity started to wane. It actually starts at 7. As soon as they move to grade 2, grade 3, the curiosity starts to dwindle. And it's like, how could we cultivate and build that? That was a point that became curious for me.
Okay.
Why was I so curious and nobody else was? Right? Around me. Where was that coming from?
Right.
And I realized we are curious, but we get curious about very specific things. You mentioned your passion for golf.
Yep.
I myself was never passionate for golf. And so it's not something I've picked up and learned deeply yet. Yeah. I just learned how to swing for the first time a couple months ago, as I shared.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, where does our curiosity lead ourselves, and how can we tap into that curiosity and cultivate it in a way? Because it's a beautiful thing when we can discover things. And I do believe it's in our nature to be curious.
Yep. I
just think we have to give ourselves the space and time to do it. And like you said, formal education can really get in the way of that.
Well, I think as you mentioned, one of the things about formal education is it's there's so many learning styles.
Yeah.
And we chose one, and that's great. And I get the concept of it, but the learning style for the curious is definitely not sitting behind a desk for 8 hours a day.
My favorite that helped me get through, so you're given a teacher. You don't get to choose them.
Nope.
You're given a teacher.
Yep.
And I remember, I think it was my mother had said, well, find what you can learn from them.
Right.
I remember I was 15, I was grade 10, and we had this teacher whose name I don't remember off the top of my head anyway. And I had learned the periodic table. I had memorized it from, the first element up to the last element. And he heard about this because other students had heard about it. So he's like, do it. So I start reading it out. And as I get to the lanthanide actinide series, you have to jump down, read those, then jump back. Well, he was just reading the periodic table left to right, and he's like, oh, you did it wrong. And I was like, definitively, I was not wrong.
Right.
But this was my teacher, and there were still a couple months to go. So I said, no, the periodic table is organized by increasing proton number. Like, I was very scientific about the way I answered it.
Right.
But I realized that while he was wrong about that, there were still some things I could learn from him.
Right.
And I didn't shut down the overall process of learning from him.
Right.
Just because he was wrong about this one thing. But I know so many who have stories like that
Right.
get shut down and don't realize how much they close off to what they can learn. So I take on the attitude, and where my curiosity has been able to sustain is, what can I learn from this person?
Right.
No matter how right or wrong I may think they are, what can I learn from them? And by taking that attitude, I've always been able to pull something out of every course, every experience, even if that's what I don't want to do.
Right.
I can grow from those experiences.
Yeah, learning is a lifestyle. We are always
Yes.
learning. And the question is, are you actually taking in the information? Because
Right.
life is always giving us an answer to something, and we're just deciding whether or not we're going to listen.
Right.
And so again, when I listen to the story, like again, the doctorates, the education, the amount of learning that you can do in the way you process the world is different than most. I understand that I'm a different animal too than most.
Yeah.
It's just, and the cool part about that is I think the mistake so often is, well, no, you got to fit this box. And that's what I meant by schooling. For me, I never fit that box because I like to learn, but I like to only learn about what I want to learn about.
Yeah.
I am not interested in what you think is important to me. I'm interested in what I think is important, but that's, again, teachers.
Yeah.
Here's the problem. They have 30 students, give or take.
Yeah.
And so they have to somehow accommodate 30 different ideas. Well, no, that's not practical.
It's very difficult to accommodate so many unique styles. You're selecting strategically who
the best
needs your support right now, how to support them. You diversify your styles as best you can. But my ideal classroom size would be 8 to 1.
Wow.
No greater than 16 to 1. And as soon as you go past, and I've been in classrooms where I've taught 16, and I've been in situations where I've taught 8. And when you get there, you can really customize the learning experience.
Right.
We also have a big bias to how people learn. I was a kinesthetic learner. I learned by hands-on.
Yep.
I also learn by through the doing process, but also I learned through hearing, through auditory.
Okay.
And I didn't realize it, but those two learning channels, if I didn't have the auditory and was only kinesthetic, I might have been steered in a very different direction.
Right.
But because I had a couple channels that I was stronger in, I was able to diversify, and eventually I built up my ability to learn visually too.
Okay.
Dancing really helped that. I had to watch and learn and copy all the time, so it built that skill up. Oftentimes we tend to say, well, just learn only the way you learn. It's actually great if you can help yourself learn in multiple ways.
Yeah, adapt
but
yourself.
You're absolutely right. I remember this one dad I met who said he gave his kid a choice. He said, I want you to learn, and I will pay for your first year of a university, or I will pay for a trip around the world. You choose. Wow. But to him, traveling around the world, which I've also had the pleasure of doing, was the education that I think it was his son, ended up choosing. And I encourage people to really rethink the formula.
Right.
The formula of education, for example, everyone, when they're younger, if you ask them, what do you want to be? Doctor, lawyer, engineer, they list the common professions, and they slate themselves towards going in the university track. The university track is very theoretical. Right. It's not for everybody. It's actually for the deeply passionate and curious about those very specific things.
Right.
The college pathway often is identified in Canada as being more hands-on learning, and we tend to say it like that, like hands-on learning, like it's somehow lesser. And it actually isn't. These are all valid and excellent forms of learning. Yep. For example, a lot of people now learn by YouTube.
Right.
They put it. I don't like learning by YouTube. I like someone being beside me and show me how to do this, and I'll mirror it, and you can give me coaching along the way. I love learning that way.
Right.
Right. So I always encourage people to learn in whatever way works best for what it is they're trying to do, and what works best for them. And sometimes that means formal education, like myself. I loved it and did it, all the way through to the end. And I may go back and do more because I enjoyed it. But I also enjoy other forms of learning too. Informal, self-taught, that's when I finally finished my last degree. I realized, I don't need more credentials. I have lots of other learning experiences and credentials I've accumulated over the years. And I realized I need to go out and live too.
Right.
I enjoy learning, but I also need to go out and live. So it's a constant balancing act between pursuing what I want to study and pursuing what I want to contribute and just living.
Yeah. And so you've lived here in Windsor for, you said 22 years or 23 years
22.
now?
Yeah.
Okay. 22 years, 21 in Chatham.
18.
18.
Yeah, the majority are now in Windsor.
Windsor. And so when you grew up as a kid, you were talking about the early years. So your family's always been in dance. Was there any other cool things when you were a child? Like, again, you talked about the dietary thing when you were younger, but when you look back to the youngest versions of yourself and you think, okay, when I was 5, 6, 7 years old, right, and I was doing those things, what were your siblings up to? Like were you, like when you look back, because again, we see the young Sheldons of the world, right?
Sure.
Do you view yourself and you look to the past as different than the other kids, or just not in a bad way, but just like, oh no, these are the things that I prioritize versus these are the things they prioritize?
When you grow up in a home of 7 siblings, you really see how the same parents can produce such different results.
Okay.
And it's not just the parents, it's also who they were. Each of my siblings were different.
Right.
And so when I look at where they've all ended up in careers that reflect their younger interests.
Okay.
So, my younger brother, Jeff, was really into athletics, and he ended up becoming a teacher, but he's still very involved in athletics. He's involved in coaching volleyball and those kinds of things. My sister started dancing at 3.
Wow.
And she opened up a studio one day. My oldest sister was passionate in acting, and she studied here at University of Windsor in the drama program, and she eventually became an elementary teacher.
There you go.
And I remember one day I show up in her class as like a photographer. That's another thing that I've done and do and enjoy. And she's like, hey, we're doing this little scene. She teaches at a Catholic school. So we're gonna do the nativity. So I want you to come in and you photograph the kids while they're doing it. So I came in and I saw at that point, I think she'd already been teaching 15 to 20 years. And what a masterful room. Like, she was just focused on setting up this nativity scene with the kids and getting them changed and put into their various outfits, while the rest of the room was managing itself.
Wow.
And I said, wow, like, they're all playing. She's like, no, they're not playing. Over here, they're learning math. And over here, they're learning this. And that kind of involvement was something I saw Krista do when I was a little kid, just as much.
Gotcha.
She helped raise me. She was how much older? I don't know, 11-ish years older than me.
Yeah.
My brothers who were interested in computers ended up in computers.
Yeah.
Many of us ended up in education. My mother was also very education oriented, so I think that had a big impact on us.
Yep.
And why we ended up there. And so, what our interests were when we were young bled into the interests that we had as we were older. I would say the big exception was myself.
Okay.
Because what I'm doing now and all of the things that I'm interested in, I didn't discover them until I was maybe 18, 19 years old.
When you're a little bit older.
Yeah, I didn't even know that they existed.
Right.
I didn't know about, motivation, self-help, and I didn't know about leadership tools and cognitive tools, but I was always a very curious person. And that curiosity has persisted, throughout. My passion and interest in school and in every subject has never waned. I'm still interested in every subject.
So you're still living curiously as we continue to move on. Yeah. So if you're thinking about leaving everybody with so when I hear you, curiosity, education, passion, if you were to synthesize your way of telling people, hey, this is life, what would you say?
It's cliche, but
sure,
life is a journey, and the journey is everything. We often think about destinations. We think about the achievements we're going to have. We think about the accomplishments that we're going to make. We think about the legacy we're going to live in the world. But in the end, life is really in that journey space. That, you hear a lot about presence and being present.
Yep.
And life is right here, right now. It's not then, and it's not there. It's right here. It's this live reciprocity that's happening that we call a conversation. It's happening when you're sitting there and you're engaging in a physical activity and you're just really in the moment, like in ballet doing a plie, bending your knees, and just really focusing on what your muscles are doing in that moment as you do the plie. It's when you're studying and you're not worrying about the outcome of the exam. You're just really curious, what is the difference between a crocodile and an alligator? Which I got wrong on a test, and I actually still don't remember.
What the difference?
Yeah, one has a pointed snout and one has a wider snout. But it's just fascinating to be fascinated in the moment And so to me, life is that journey, and that's why the journey is everything. I remember hearing this quote by Gandhi: "The means by which we achieve success are the means by which we are undone."
Oh.
And that stuck with me, that quote. When I went to India, that was one of the countries I backpacked. I followed a lot of Gandhi's movements and ashrams and places he went. I was still am very interested in how he lived his life and what he did with it. But what really stuck with me when I think about that is the means is everything. The journey. The journey is everything that we do. And so I spend most of my energy and thoughts now on what's my journey.
What's my journey? That's awesome, man. So if people are looking to catch up with you and find you with Meta Excellence and other things you're up to, where would they find you?
So they can find me on Meta Excellence. They can find on Facebook. We have it on Instagram. We have it on LinkedIn. It's called Meta Excellence. That's one of the easiest ways to find me. You'll find me on socials as well as Justin Teeuwen if you want to go and look me up. But if I don't know you, I may not add you back. It's more social setting. But yeah, they can find me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. We also have a website, meta-excellence.com.
Okay.
And so people can also check me out there. And, I look forward to hearing from anyone who's curious about anything and where they want to go next. Because for me, I love equipping people with the tools they have to achieve their dreams. So I'm deeply curious what their dreams are and where they can end up with them.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much, Justin, for coming. Hey, guys, thanks again for watching another episode of Real Stories. We'll look forward to having you back again one day.
Love it. Cheers.
Bye.